welcome to the Essex Book Festival podcast. My name is Daisy, and I am going to be speaking to some of the people behind this year's festival. My guest today is a writer whose debut novel, Everland, has been hailed as a novel of huge power by Esther Freud, and who will be joining the Essex Book Festival at Hot Box in Chelmsford on the 25th of June. Please welcome Amy Abdelnoor. Hi.
Thank you.
So first off, we're thrilled that you're going to be here with us at Essex Book Festival talking about Everland. So before we start, can you just tell us a little bit about the novel and why we should all read it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a bit of a, overview of the book. So a teenage girl reluctantly relocates from London to a settlement in Israel and is haunted by a past that refuses to remain silent. Another teenager is watching the Londoner, Dina, attempt to adjust to this new life, which to Dina feels soulless and suffocating. So the girl watching her is Safa, a Palestinian girl who was shot and killed decades ago in the 1967 Six-Day War. She's unable to pass on fully until she finds out what happened to her little sister Noor, who's still alive somewhere. And after 33 years, the possibility of finding her sister is in reach, but Safa needs Dina's help. So it's a story of connection and displacement. It's set in 2000s Palestine, obviously with a split narrative between 1967 and 2000s. And in terms of why we should read it, we should read it because we should all read books to empathize. We can talk about that later. But also, I really think that right now, I started writing it years ago. But right now, I think anybody wishing to really understand and get to grips with what's going on now and the greatest tragedy of our age should be reading this book, because I think, it's a great way into understanding better the history and historical truths.
Thank you. So you say you've been writing the book for years. Can you tell us a little bit about that? So obviously this is your first book. Where did your inspiration come from for that?
Yeah, so well, I started writing it properly in 2019, but my inspiration comes from, so my background is Lebanese. I'm Lebanese English, so my mum was half Lebanese. So it's my grandfather, it's my maternal grandfather who was Lebanese. My mum was raised here in the UK, but I was always really fascinated by our heritage. I always wanted to find out more about why my mum didn't speak Arabic, actually, was a key issue for me growing up. And when I was at university, I, to kind of quite a long story short, ended up studying Arabic. And I found out about a charity, a very small UK educational exchange charity that worked with Palestinians in refugee camps. And I went in my second year at university to live in Lebanon in Palestinian refugee camps. I went there for a few summers. And when I graduated from university, I decided to go to Ramallah. And the second Intifada had actually started, but I went anyway. I'm sure my parents weren't too pleased about that. But so basically, I had a very immersive understanding of what was going on in the area. So it was obviously, through my heritage, super important to me. And then I connected very deeply with the Palestinian story. And, I felt very, very much that what was being told about Palestinians here in the UK was not the reality I was seeing and understanding on the ground. And part of the educational exchange program I've been on had been about learning the Palestinian story and about coming back and talking about it. And I guess really the book came from a place of wanting to be able to take people through my writing to a place they may never be able to go to themselves. And the reason it took me so long to write is probably a very different personal story of growth and development and change, and believing in myself that I could write it, put it into a novel form. Yeah,
wow,
so that's
you. So it sounds like a very very personal book for you, and something that's really come from you and taken a long time for you to write. What are you hoping that readers are going to take away from it?
Well, I think, literature is my other thing, alongside like my Arab heritage and all the values that gives me, and obviously my family. I'm an English teacher, and books have always been me and defined me. And I do read a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, but really I think fiction and stories, stories are what make us humans. We work on stories. Stories are the sort of bedrock of everything that we're doing, whether it's talking to friends, whether it's the stories and creation of fictional stories, or whether it's telling truths through story so that we remember it and understand it. I mean, storytelling is as old as time, right? That's how news traveled. Ballads are a form of storytelling. That's how gossip went from one place to another before we had newspapers and things like that. So we work on stories. That's what we do as humans. And I love reading nonfiction about things that interest me, but the difference between reading something like Everland and coming to the region and the history and the people through a story that is ultimately about universality and universal human experience is so tangibly different from reading a nonfiction book. So I would, I think it's almost more inclusive in a way to write in a story form. Nonfiction, some people obviously love reading nonfiction. That's great. And I'm all about it. But I would say if people find that difficult, then they come to a story first, and then they might go off and read the other things and think, oh, I want to find out more about that. And then actually reading the nonfiction book about something you may not know much about is going to make a lot more sense to you through having empathized with it. And the same could be true of anything. You could read a book about environmental disaster and not have engaged with what climate change is, and then you could go away and do some research. So I think, essentially what makes us act as human beings and sort of engage with things comes from empathy. And our first port is, if we've experienced something, we tend to then be actively engaged in it. It's no surprise that people who've experienced awful tragedies to do with, say, social media and the effect on young people are going to become the most outspoken advocates for that. And then it's if it's happened to somebody that or is related to you. And then the third step is really engaging through story. So for me, that's why it's so powerful. So, first of all, obviously, I want people to read it and love it and not be able to put it down, even if it's distressing. But I mean, everything I read is pretty depressing. So for me, it's kind of just like par for the course to read something that makes me cry. But, ultimately, I want people to read it and engage with my characters. And then through that, I want them to, make connections they might not otherwise connect. And, it's about seeing that universality, and it's about seeing people that might have been misrepresented, or people that you have no idea about, or communities and environments you have no idea about, and actually being able to see the human in them and therefore make the connection. And from that, we build better societies.
That's a really great point, actually, because there are so many, just thinking off the top of my head, there are so many issues that I think have really reached people and sort of come through to people through the medium of fiction first, either a book or movies or things like that, and they maybe make people aware of something. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the other day I was watching a film. It's a really old Jodie Comer film. Well, really old, as in, it was one of her early films. And it was about just in line with my doing everything that's depressing. It was a nice light-hearted evening of watching a film about London flooding, and society breaking down. I think it was called The End is in the Beginning, or The Beginning is in the End. And I mean, it was fairly traumatic, but it was about climate change. But it was obviously a story of a woman who gave birth, like literally as her house was being flooded, and then having to flee her house in London, and everyone was fleeing London because it's uninhabitable. Actually, it was adapted from a novel. But this is what we do: we engage, and then people who may not have be sentient about, or really have woken up to these things, or really have engaged with them, might think, okay, this is something I want to find out more about.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So Everland has already been receiving some critical acclaim. So can you tell us a little bit about who has endorsed the novel and just what it means to you as a debut author? It must be amazing, right?
It's incredible. I mean, the last few years have been really difficult in lots of ways. Obviously, editing the book during the last 3 years has been really, really tough. Obviously, not as tough as people living in Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon, but by any means. But I think to have had these moments of it going out into the world and receiving this kind of response has just been, real high point and obviously just completely overwhelming. I mean, I feel really lucky to have had the support of people giving their time to read it. Um, and like real euphoria getting reviews in. I mean, when Louise Kennedy's came in, I think I was kind of on a high for the whole evening, because I was also reading Louise Kennedy's Trespasses and Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead in summer 23, which is when I'd signed with my agent, the brilliant Sophie Lambert at CW. With a full manuscript, and so they were, and that was the shortlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction. So to kind of now to have been reading her and listening, I went to the event, went to listen to them speak in London, and to have kind of been looking at her and seeing her book do so well, and then have her endorse it was really fantastic. And she sent me a message on social, on Instagram, and said was very personal. So it was really, really wonderful. Owen Jones, obviously, his endorsement the other week was fantastic. Juliet Stevenson. I mean, I just feel really lucky because I've got, all my endorsements are from really, brilliant writers and public figures or actor, journalist. But Priscilla Morris as well, another one on the Women's Prize for Fiction long list that year, shortlist that year, who has endorsed it. Guy Gunaratney, Colin McCann. So people whose work has been really validated by readership, and whose work's really loved, just feels amazing. And I think you work on this book for years, and it's really a part of you, and people kind of joke. I mean, it's like another baby. It really is. You're like nurturing and loving and are so intimately connected to, and you're dreaming it. You're, wondering, walking on the road, thinking about it, like working out a scene or working out how to get through something that's been like difficult to write, that's been a challenge. Um, and then, of course, it goes out in the world, when the proofs first came in, and it was so exciting to see it as a physical book, and then think, oh my God, now people are going to read this, and what if it's no good? And of course, we all have imposter syndrome, So I think it's just been incredible to kind of think, all right, obviously there are thousands and thousands of different views out there, but to be going out with that strength of response is just really incredible. I also think it really speaks to the need for this kind of story. And I think the time that people who are very, very busy have given to it speaks to that need. I think that, we are being massively challenged in society right now by a lot of doublethink, a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of what people call noise. I don't think mainstream media is helping massively, is an understatement. And actually, people are therefore turning to, other stories, other voices for understanding. And I think that the kind of, I think the time that people who are very busy, public figures, as it were, and writers have given to it is recognition that these kinds of things need to find a place in the world where they might not traditionally, they might find it hard to find that space otherwise.
Yeah, it's quite an inspiring message, isn't it? Like the sort of, things finding their place. It sounds like you've been on a real journey with this book. It's, been a long sort of process for you. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Because obviously, it takes a long time, doesn't it, before, writing, editing, being signed, it's quite a journey. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really committed to writing per se in about 2018, 2019. And it was a point all three of my children were back in school. We'd been home educating for a while. My oldest daughter went to secondary school. And I was writing, I was just kind of writing just to write and kind of as a therapy kind of process. And I had the idea for this book. And and then I went back to all my diaries and all my emails and all the letters I'd sent home when I'd been living in Lebanon and Ramallah to kind of really re-immerse myself in that time and everything I'd felt. So it was obviously a lot of personal process in that as well. Anyway, I had the idea, the crux of the idea, and I just knew how it was going to start. And actually, it was a couple of different things that had come together. It was the idea of the suber plant, which is the cactus plant that continues to grow. The cactus plants used to be used by Palestinians as the fences for their land, and even when their villages are destroyed, the cactus plant carries on growing, which is why it's become symbolic of Palestinian patience. So it kind of had this idea of the land speaking and the land holding memories, and not being silenced. And then I'd been reading other things, including Murid Barghouti's I Saw Ramallah. I'm just looking up on my shelf to remember which of his books it was in, where he talks about the difference between firsts and seconds and where you choose to start your story. And I just thought, that's it. I know where I'm starting my story now. And so I just bashed out the first kind of 5 chapters really quickly. And then I reached an impasse. Anyway, so it's been then I had to do a whole load more reading and research and thinking, and your brain does obviously a lot of subconscious work. Anyway, I basically got a draft out. I can't remember, I think about 2 years later, I finished a draft and I put it away for a few months, and then I took it out and thought, no, this is all wrong. And after the first 5 chapters that stayed quite similar, I basically rewrote the whole thing, but I had the whole story, but I needed to rewrite the way I was telling it. So I essentially, I dumped the majority of 100,000 words, and I just, so I had the first 5 chapters or whatever, and then I'd changed the way I was writing it. And then when I'd written the whole book like that, I was like, no, I need to go back to the first way I was writing it. So then I rewrote the whole thing. But actually, that was much easier because I knew what I was doing, and the story was there. Everything in the story was there, and I'd done loads of character work, and I knew my characters. And that was around the time I was shortlisted for the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize, which was great. And that was amazing because that obviously Rose Tremaine has endorsed it, and she was the judge then. So that was really special to build up that connection with her. And that was when I then signed with Sophie. So I'd already done like 4 or 5 edits on it by the time I signed with Sophie on my own. And then we worked on it for a year. I did think about 2, maybe 3 edits with her. Nothing structural, like the structure was all there, but just digging into certain parts of it and rewriting parts of it. And then we signed with Penguin. I signed with Penguin in the end of the summer 2024. And it's coming out in summer 26. And I mean, that's just, the industry takes its time. So yeah, it's a process though. I think there's some parts of it you really can't rush. I think a whole load of subconscious work, you just have to let your subconscious do it. And I think sometimes you're writing things that this isn't right, this isn't good, this is going to have to be cut, but you kind of have to write it to get it out there, or I do anyway, to process it. And yeah, and then I think it's interesting when something just clarifies, and you do. Oh, I certainly did that thing of like, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and go, that's it, I've got it. And it might just be a line that then made me be able to write another chapter, or it might be something I sorted out, or yeah, just waking up in the morning and thinking, I just know what my character's going to do next. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard work. It's such hard work. I'm just trying to start work properly on another book now, and I'm kind of bracing myself for the fact that it's really painful. But it's painful, but it's good. Like, it's that weird thing where it's like going for a run. You feel so much better when you've done it. So if you've done an hour's writing, you're like, yes, I've done it, even if it's not very good. But I think I just keep thinking, it's okay. The first draft is going to be a complete mess. And that's okay, because once I've got that, I'll know where I'm going with it.
Wow, that is quite a nuts process. So that 100,000 words, I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, to dump 100,000 words, to literally go, I've got to start the whole thing again. Like I remember reading it thinking, the plot is really good. The plot really works, but God, this is I don't want to read the next page. I like, so it's very helpful as well to know that you need to put something in a drawer and come back to it. So yeah, but I mean, it was, as I say, the components of the story didn't change. I just needed to retell the way I was writing it. And actually, the thing that was the big thing for me was I knew exactly what the last scene of the book was going to be. I knew that from when I first started writing it. From my very first draft, I knew exactly how it had to end. And I'd got in this very, very first draft that I dumped, I'd got all the way to the last scene. And I remember I would go into school, it was the summer term, and I was going in really early into school to go to a cafe before I started work. And for about 3 weeks, I just sat there thinking, I can't write this last scene. Like, I know what it needs to be, but I can't write it. And I think that's what told me there's something wrong with the way you're telling this, because this is not coming out now and it should be coming out. So that's when I was like, right, khalas, I need to go back, give it a break and go back. And actually, it was almost quite, I think in a way, although it was difficult, oh my God, it's a lot of work to dump, it was quite liberating to think, oh, I know what I've got to do now. On a much smaller scale, I do say to my students all the time, you've got to redraft your coursework essays. Like they're panicking about 3,000 words. I'm like, really, this is not enough work. 3,000 words is nothing. You can bang that out in one morning. But like they're getting really panicked. And I go, it's okay. You can write it and it can all be wrong and you can start again and it will be better. So trust me.
I love that. You're there like, I have done more words than you have written. Like,
exactly. I'm like, really, you're stressing about 3,000 words. It's really not much. Obviously, an 18-year-old doesn't really want to hear that, but
well, amateurs.
Pardon?
Amateurs.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously you've gone through this process. You're now at quite a different phase. Your promotion, and you're on tour, and your Essex Book Festival is part of that, which we're very excited to have you with us. So
I'm excited to be
there. Good. You're coming to Hot Box in Chelmsford, and you're going to be in conversation with Rachel Holmes on Thursday, the 25th of June. It's going to be a great evening. What are you looking forward to most about it?
Oh, well, I mean, I think, first of all, I think it's my second event. So that's pretty exciting. So that's good. And it's quite special to be in conversation with Rachel because she was one of my earliest endorsers. I think she was the second one I got in. I don't know her. I'd been connected with her through a mutual friend who said, I think Rachel will like it. And her endorsement really blew me away. And she comes from a background, she's was a anti-apartheid activist in South Africa. So she really comes from a background of really understanding apartheid and subjugation and oppression, and actually she knows Palestine quite well. So it was something she was naturally going to be interested in. But I think one of the things she said was that it was a belting good read, and I just thought great, because having gone through that process of thinking I need to rewrite this, I thought yes, I've done it. It's a belting good read, because that's a really hard thing to assess about your own work, even when you kind of think you've got it right. Even when you've signed with an agent and then you're rereading and thinking, is this really page turning? I know what's going to happen. That's difficult. So I think just to have somebody talking to me who really gets the kind of political parameters, but also massively engaged with it as a story. And she's a critically acclaimed biographer. She's very intelligent. So I think it will be a very insightful and educational discussion. But also, she's hugely personable. I've met her now for coffee, and we had a really good chat. So I think that it will be very interesting to be able to talk about the writing of the book and the process of writing, and also the kind of historical elements of it and how it brings that out. And I think her kind of personal experience as somebody who's had to challenge the way that people of her background were behaving in a country, and she's obviously from a white South African background. I think that's going to be really, really interesting to have her take on it, given it's a split narrative. So I'm really excited about that in general, and I hope we get a really great audience. I'm very happy for people to come with their questions. I think conversation and we learn, we understand through conversation and through talking. We have to listen. We have to be ready to ask questions, and we have to, have those dialogues and discussions that some people might consider difficult. I think that's really important. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be in Essex. I was brought up here, so it's my local festival. So I think that's very special for me to be doing something that is, local, but obviously I've been looking, Essex Book Festival, to be in a festival that's been on my doorstep for years is really special. It's great to be a local author, but somebody who's also saying we don't have to just, we can act locally, but actually we need to have an understanding of how we are all interconnected in the world, that we just it's really important. I think people think, well, why does what's happening there matter? Well, it does matter because we're all connected, and actually all these things, everything that we're seeing play out on our political landscape today is connected to the way that, it's connected to British Empire, it's connected to our history. So I think actually people engaging with that's important. And also, Chelmsford's become increasingly multicultural and diverse over the last 10, 15 years. Which I think is really great and positive thing. So I think people embracing and understanding what diversity really means is also super important. So I think having a book like this in the festival is great.
I think that's a great point, because actually our festival director, Ross, she often says that we are a local festival, but we have international tentacles.
Great. That's great. Yeah, that's really good. And I think I mean, people who read, you hope people who read are interested, obviously, in a broader cultural debate. But we're so up against it with reading, aren't we, now in society? I mean, statistics for young people reading are more depressing than ever. The challenges of reading and social media for young people are obviously really real. So I think also, my kind of position as a teacher as well as a writer is quite interesting. And I do see the interconnectivity of all these issues. I see the demise in reading. There's no surprise that it's correlating to a rise in use of AI, but B, a rise in a really extreme political far right. So, and historically, we understand that books have been banned when fascism has been on the rise. So I think all these things, they feel to people sometimes like too big and something that, as I say, doesn't affect them. But I think actually we have to try and, we want to build better societies. We want to build better communities. So, and, to be at Hot Box, I think is great. It's a small local venue that's supporting art and culture, aside from its being a venue for Essex Book Festival. And that's great. I think it does poetry and performance, all year round. And these are the kinds of spaces we need. Culture and the arts have taken a real hit over the last 10, 15 years. And again, we're seeing the repercussions and effects of that. And I go back to it the whole time in my teaching. We can't just focus only on sciences. That's not how we build good societies. We need to have arts and the importance of arts in there for what they give us that isn't like statistically measurable. So I think all of that, the kind of, so to be in a space where I can be supporting that and be part of a space that is all about the promotion of arts and culture in general in a community is really important.
Thank you. Yes, Hot Box is an amazing venue. These grassroots music and performance venues, they really need our support, and it's amazing to be part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it will be a brilliant evening, and yeah, we can't wait to hear you. I'm going to be there, and lots of other people will be as well.
Great.
Yeah, so we just want everyone to come and experience it for themselves, and it will be really good. We're really looking forward to it. Do you think, obviously, as you sort of mentioned, like, in this sort of time, that these kind of live events and these sort of, like, local grassroots, do you think they're more important than they used to be, these kind of things like the book festival?
Yeah, I think well, I've been having this conversation a lot recently with people around me in terms of really the challenges of AI. And actually, the idea that, you have to be so careful about what you look at online, whether it's an AI generated video, people impersonating, etc., through AI. And I kind of feel like the balance redress is surely going to be that people are going to strive for real life experiences and also for things that they know are made by real humans. I mean, certainly that's what I want. I'm not really interested in, I wouldn't, you can tell when something's written by AI, it sounds false. Like, I mean, obviously, as a writer, I'm really worried about my work being impersonated by AI. That terrifies me. I'm really terrified by the lack of, legislation around AI, and I think all artists, musicians, and art, physical art. It's really worrying. So I kind of think, yeah, I just I wonder at what point the balance is going to tip and people are going to go, actually, I want human interaction. I mean, I come from a place of sometimes I feel I'm a bit Hardy-esque, like fearing the ache of modernism. Um, but I mean, Hardy would be absolutely, turning in his grave right now if he could see where we were for sure. But I do, yeah. So I think these in-person events are important because people need to trust that there's a human being behind things. And also, again, I do think a lot of problems in society have been created through a lack of human connection. And, before you even get to kind of like problems of, say, racism and political divide and all that, those kinds of big problems that I worry about a lot, even just problems with the elderly and isolation and lack of connection because we don't have the same postal service and postmen knocking on the door, that we don't have the checkout counter person talking. So all these things, I think, yeah, human connection is important. People seem to have forgotten these big missing links in life, which is that's why stories are important, and this is why actually, it's great that we can have this meeting now online and we can be very efficient in the amount of time we have, of course, but actually being in person with somebody is very, very different. And I think also, yeah, and I think as a writer, I want to connect to readers. I think as a reader, it's great when you do actually hear from writers in real life. It's one is always fascinated as somebody interested in culture about the thought processes behind it. That's why all these kind of biopics are always really interesting, aren't they? About musicians or individuals, like how did that the shaping of that person come together? So yeah, and again, and it is, as always, all about community. You bring people together and things happen that are unforeseen, hopefully for the best. Those is the prediction, the interactions you can't predict. It's the things that come up that you can sort of plan for everything and think something's going to go a certain way, and then questions get asked or dynamics happen that you wouldn't have been able to foresee, and those are the special moments, I guess.
Definitely. And yeah, you cannot get more human than the Essex Book Festival. We have lots of human writers and humans speaking to them, and we as a human can come along and find out more.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great because it's over a month, isn't it? The festival. It's a really good, I mean, it's quite special to have a festival over the whole county over such a long period, because often festivals are just, over a weekend or a week, aren't they? So I think that's a really nice part of it. It's a really
Yes,
good way of people getting involved.
yes, it's very different, and we do say that there is something for everybody wherever you are in Essex and whatever you're interested in. There's
Yeah.
100
Well, and
events. So.
my colleague is doing a nature walk. So
Oh,
Michael Warren is doing his nature walk.
brilliant.
So
Oh,
yeah, we teach
wonderful.
together and talk books together. So we're very lucky.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's really brilliant. That must be very
Yeah,
special for you both. That's
yeah,
brilliant. Lovely.
yeah.
Well, so I will say thank you very much for speaking to me today,
Pleasure.
and I will sign off now and and say thank you very much. And for anybody, yeah, who is interested, your event is going to be on Thursday, the 25th of June, Hot Box in Chelmsford, and it's going to be a great one.